Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today we're going to go over the basics of a technique called layering. Now layering is one that you might have heard of already because it's at the core of pretty much everything we do. It's a very simple technique and one which, using a few different sort of applications, you can get some pretty different results out of. Now today what I've got in front of me is one of Black Tree Design's US Troopers, and I've chosen him because you've already seen one of the ways in which I paint these guys. So using layering instead of my sort of usual dry brush and shade gives me an opportunity to sort of show you the different results you can get. As you can see, he's pretty cool. I'm quite pleased with how he came out, and it's all very simple stuff. At its core, layering is just taking a colour and putting it over top of another, which sounds like an incredibly sort of reductive way of putting it, but that is the basics of the technique. So for this video, we're going to start at the point where all of our base colours have already been blocked in and done. It's not really a particularly important part of what we're going to do. What I really want to show off is the technique instead. Now, if you've been watching me for any length of time, you'll know that once these block colours are done, this is normally when we bust out the Agrax Earthshade and give him a very liberal wash. But we're going to swap things up a little bit, and instead, we're going to use a more relevant colour for each of our washes, rather than doing one all-over shade. So I've got my Agrax Earthshade, and that's going to go on things like his trousers and any of the boots and sort of webbing. I've got Athonian Camo Shade, and I'm going to do that over that nice green jacket. Reikland Flesh Shade obviously will go onto his skin, and then Nuln Oil I'm going to touch in any metal parts and his gun, which I do want to be a slightly darker sort of wooden brown. Now one of the advantages to doing things this way is that when we layer over the next colour, we're going to get overall, I guess, a more accurate finish than we would by just blasting the whole thing with Agrax Earthshade. I tend to like this for larger concentrations of infantry because that kind of brownish tint overall makes them look like they've seen a little bit more action. But if you want your colours to be quote-unquote perfect, then I think this is a slightly more accurate way of going about it. This guy will look a lot more clean than the other comrades of his that I've already painted. But what we'll have instead is, I guess, a fella who's maybe a replacement to the front, or he's just had the fortune of a hot shower and a change of uniform. Whatever the case, let's get started laying down some of these shades. I've got here my shade brush, and I'm going to do everything from sort of the trousers down in Agrax Earthshade. When I come up to do the webbing around his waist and across his chest there, that strap, I'm going to swap down to just a standard brush, or a, medium layer brush, and we'll see how that goes from there. I don't want to be too generous with this. I'm really just using it to block out where those shades are going to be. But for the most part, this is very similar to how you normally would do it. So head around now, and anywhere that you've got that you want to be Agrax Earthshaded, do that now. And like I said, any smaller areas, just get your standard brush out, or your medium layer brush, and be a little bit more careful in your application. Technique is still the same though. Now it's important to let each of these stages dry thoroughly before you move on to the next. It won't matter too much if you get a little bit of sort of overlap between the colour stages, but you don't want them to mix and sort of run. So I've given that a good half hour, and I'm going to come back, and now I've got my Athonian Camo Shade. So still just using that layer brush, load it up, and get in and start doing the same thing again. Same technique. Just make sure you're working it into your recesses and along any hard edges. And then we do the same thing with our Reikland Flesh Shade. And finally, just a little Nuln Oil on his gun. So far, so familiar, right? We've just gone ahead and done some washes over our block colours. Now the simplest method of layering is once you've washed your base colour, is to go ahead and grab the base colour again and go back over the top. So on his trousers here, for example, I'm going back to Flat Earth and I'm going to paint in most of his trousers. But anywhere that the wash is settled in any of these deeper recesses, I'm going to avoid that with the paint I'm using. So in this way, I'm getting a really smooth transition of colour from one to the next. So I've blocked in his trousers again, and I've also done at the same time the khaki on his gaiters and the wood on his gun. Now you'll see here there's a big difference in colour between the khaki that I've painted back up and the old sort of haversack thing he's got going there that I haven't painted yet. And that's because I want to demonstrate something else you can do, which is to use a similar but different colour to layer up from. So over this khaki bag, instead of using khaki, I've actually got here, this is German camo beige. And this is going to give a slightly more sort of worn appearance to this canvas bag he's carrying. And what I'm going to do is exactly the same thing. Just get in there and highlight up by avoiding the very deepest parts of colour and using this instead of khaki to change up the tone just a little bit. So there's our camo beige over the top of the khaki, and if I spin him around, you can see that there is a bit of a difference in shade between those two, and that helps accentuate the difference in his equipment a little. Now what I'm going to do next is his jacket, and there's yet again something else you can do with layering. Now if I go ahead and I put his base coat straight over the top of that green, it's going to look a little bit flat. US dark green over the Athonian camo shade isn't going to stand out too much. Whereas if I go straight up to the highlight color I want to use, which is green-gray, that's going to be a very sharp transition and it won't look very good. So this is where I get into mixing colors. Now, in a lot of cases, especially using Citadel stuff, there's a huge range of colors you're not going to have to worry about mixing. But if you do, and you're going to be painting a lot of something, it pays to mix up a bottle of it. So I've got here one of these little bottles that I've actually ordered in a big pack. I got 10 of these. It was a matter of cents from Amazon. Just search for dropper bottles that you can use. And I've done in 5 parts of dark green to 3 parts of green-gray. And that's going to be my transition color. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to layer the same as I did with his trousers, but with US green tone over the top of this jacket that I've done. So we'll see how that looks. So, like I said, we're now going to do this in exactly the same way as we painted the trousers, except we're going to leave a little bit more of those recesses intact. And you can see this goes on pretty green. It's still quite a big sharp difference. But once it dries, it's going to be a sort of much more subtle transition than just grey-green would be. So I'm going to go around now and I'm going to sort of fill in all of the areas I want to be that lighter green area. See, now we're getting somewhere. Now, you might think that's quite a sharp transition, and I still quite like that greenish grey effect. That's what I think sort of looks like a nice worn jacket. At this stage, if you're not a big fan of sort of how your mix has gone, what you can do is just go ahead and get that wash and go over the top again. So if I wasn't a fan of this, I might do my Athonian camo shade over the top of that again. So what we'll do, just for the purposes of the demonstration, is I'll go ahead and do that now. Now, wouldn't you know it, the moment I've gone and let that dry, I actually decide I like that a lot more. So there it goes to show you the value of experimentation. Now what I'm going to do now is actually go ahead and I'm just going to highlight them in the way that I normally would. So, like I said, I'm probably going to skip over some of those bits because that's really techniques I've already covered. And the important thing with this was really to show off the ways that you can use different approaches to layering to get a similar but slightly different effect. So, base coat, wash, then reapplying the base coat wash and a mix, and then, hey, maybe another wash over the top, and then base coat, wash, and a slightly different color over the top. So like I said, let's get those highlights on and we'll see how he looks when he's finished how I normally would. And there we have it, guys, with just one edge highlight over the top of everything else we've done so far. There is our trooper finished. And you can see how using layering and then going to our edge highlight allows for a much smoother transition of color, which looks, I think, a little more realistic. Now, this isn't a way with which I would churn out a huge amount of infantry in one go. There I'd still probably look at dry brushing or just the old Agrax Earthshade and then highlight up. But if you're looking at a piece that you want to do as a centerpiece for your army, or you really want to spend the time and make each of you guys look really cracking on the table, then this is a great way to go about doing it. Layering will give you a smoother finish. So what I'm going to do now is base this fella up, get him ready for some photos. As ever, guys, you can get in touch. Just drop a comment into the YouTube box down there, or you can see me on Facebook or Twitter. At rare occasions such as this, I'm going to rattle the tip jar as well. I have got a Ko-fi account set up where if you like what I'm doing, you can drop a couple of dollars in. Anything is greatly appreciated, helps keep me in paints and glue. So thank you very much, as always, guys, for your time, and you enjoy the rest of your day.